The most powerful men on Earth didn't die because they lost power. They died because of it. 10 dictators. 268 years of absolute rule combined. Every single one was destroyed by the very system they built. From a drainage pipe in Libya to a bunker in Berlin. This is how power killed every one of them. Case 1. Kim Jong-il. Natural death. December 17, 2011. Somewhere on a private armored train between Pyongyang and the East Coast. North Korea's dear leader suffered a massive heart attack at the age of 69. He had ruled for 17 years, overseeing a nuclear weapons program, a network of prison camps holding an estimated 200,000 people, and a famine that killed between 240,000 and 3.5 million of his own citizens. His death was kept secret for 2 days. When state media finally announced it, the broadcast showed a newsreader in black, weeping on camera. What followed was a choreographed national funeral, millions lining frozen streets, soldiers collapsing in synchronized grief, and a 19-mile procession through Pyongyang. Within weeks, his 27-year-old son, Kim Jong-un, was installed as supreme leader. No trial, no revolution, no justice. The system Kim built didn't die with him. It was designed not to. Kim died peacefully. Not every dictator was that lucky. Case 2. Pinochet, old age, unfinished justice, Augusto Pinochet. December 10, 2006. Santiago Military Hospital, Chile. On September 11, 1973, Pinochet led a military coup against Chile's democratically elected president. Warplanes bombed the presidential palace. Within hours, he controlled the country. He would hold it for 17 years. During that time, his regime killed over 3,000 people. An estimated 28,000 were tortured. Around 200,000 were forced into exile. Pinochet built a security apparatus so thorough that dissidents were tracked across continents. Operation Condor coordinated assassinations across 6 South American countries. When democracy returned in 1990, Pinochet had written himself into the Constitution as senator for life with full immunity. For over a decade, he avoided prosecution. In 1998, he was arrested in London on a Spanish warrant, then released on medical grounds. In 2004, a Chilean court finally stripped his immunity. Indictments followed. House arrest followed. But on December 10, 2006, at the age of 91, Pinochet suffered a heart attack and died. The trials were never completed. The verdicts were never delivered. The man who overthrew democracy used democratic institutions to shield himself for 16 years. It almost worked. Pinochet escaped the courtroom. The next dictator escaped something worse. Case 3. Pol Pot, Death in the Jungle, Pol Pot. April 15, 1998. A jungle compound near An Long Veng, Cambodia. Between 1975 and 1979, Pol Pot's Khmer Rouge emptied Cambodia's cities and turned the country into a forced labor state. An estimated 1.7 to 2.5 million people died, roughly 25% of the entire population, from execution, starvation, and disease. Pol Pot was never tried. On the night of April 15, 1998, hours before he was to be handed over to an international tribunal, he died. Official cause: heart failure. He was 73. His followers placed his body on a pile of old tires and garbage and burned it. The man who erased a quarter of his country was erased by a pile of trash. Pol Pot's body was burned on garbage. At least his death was quick. Case 4. Hitler. Suicide in the bunker, Adolf Hitler. April 30th, 1945. The Führer bunker, 8.5 meters beneath the Reich Chancellery, central Berlin. By the spring of 1945, the man who had conquered most of Europe was living underground. Soviet artillery was striking the city center. The Red Army was less than 500 meters from his position. Hitler had ruled for 12 years. His regime had systematically murdered 6 million Jews and triggered a war that killed over 70 million people, the deadliest conflict in human history. On the afternoon of April 30th, with Soviet troops closing in, Hitler retreated to his private quarters with Eva Braun, his wife of 40 hours. She bit into a cyanide capsule. He placed a Walther PPK 7.65mm pistol to his right temple and fired. Their bodies were carried to the garden above and burned with 200 liters of gasoline. The man who built the Third Reich to last 1,000 years ended it in a concrete box, soaked in fuel. Hitler chose his own death. Stalin didn't get that option. Case 5. Stalin, 12 hours on the floor. Joseph Stalin. March 1st, 1953. Kuntsevo Dacha, a fortified compound outside Moscow. Stalin had ruled the Soviet Union for nearly 30 years. His purges and forced labor camps killed an estimated 6 to 20 million people. He had executed so many of his own generals, doctors, and advisors that by 1953, no one in his inner circle trusted anyone else, and everyone feared him. On the evening of February 28th, Stalin had dinner with 4 senior Politburo members. He retired to his private rooms around 4 a.m. The next day, he didn't emerge. His guards noticed. They did nothing. By mid-afternoon on March 1st, Stalin had been on the floor for roughly 12 hours. He had suffered a massive cerebral hemorrhage. He was partially conscious, lying in his own urine, unable to speak or move. His guards stood outside the door. None of them entered. They were afraid. Not afraid he was dying, afraid he wasn't. Afraid that opening that door without permission would be the last thing they ever did. A doctor was finally called. 12 hours after the stroke. By then, the damage was irreversible. Stalin lingered for 4 more days, gasping and convulsing, before dying on March 5th at the age of 74. The man who made an entire empire afraid to act died because no one dared to. Stalin was killed by fear. The next dictator was killed by loyalty. Case 6. Trujillo. Ambushed by insiders Rafael Trujillo. May 30th, 1961. A coastal highway outside Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic. Trujillo had ruled the Dominican Republic for 31 years. He renamed the capital after himself. He had his opponents disappeared, tortured, or fed to sharks in the Caribbean. His secret police, the SIM, operated with total impunity. But by 1961, even his allies had had enough. On the evening of May 30th, Trujillo's Chevrolet Bel Air was driving along a coastal highway when a car pulled alongside. 7 men, most of them former military officers, some of them once loyal to the regime, opened fire. 27 bullets hit the car. Trujillo, 69 years old, was struck multiple times. He stepped out of the vehicle, drew his revolver, and fired back. He was shot again and killed on the road. The men who pulled the triggers had once saluted him. The power that made them loyal is the same power that made them pull the trigger. Trujillo's assassination happened in secret. What comes next was televised. Case 7. Ceaușescu. 120-plus bullets on Christmas Day, Nicolae Ceaușescu. December 25, 1989. Târgoviște Military Base, Romania. Ceaușescu had ruled Romania for 24 years. On December 21st, he stood on the balcony of the Central Committee building in Bucharest to address a crowd of 100,000. The crowd was supposed to cheer. They booed. Within hours, he fled by helicopter. Within days, he was captured. On Christmas morning, Nicolae and Elena Ceaușescu were brought before a military tribunal. The trial lasted approximately 55 minutes. The verdict was predetermined. The sentence, death by firing squad. They were led to a courtyard and stood against a wall. Ceaușescu was still speaking when the soldiers raised their rifles. He knew. Elena knew. The squad opened fire before the order was fully given. Over 120 rounds were fired in under 60 seconds. The footage was broadcast on Romanian state television that evening, the same network that had spent 24 years broadcasting his speeches. Now it broadcast his corpse. Ceaușescu was shot by soldiers. The next dictator was left to the crowd. Case 8. Mussolini, hung upside down, Benito Mussolini. April 28, 1945. Giulino di Mezzagra, a village on the western shore of Lake Como, Italy. Mussolini had ruled Italy for 21 years. He had invented modern fascism, built a cult of personality around physical strength and Roman glory, and demanded that crowds worship him in public squares across the country. By April 1945, that was over. Allied forces controlled most of Italy. Mussolini was fleeing north toward Switzerland with his mistress, Clara Petacci, disguised in a German Luftwaffe greatcoat and hidden in the back of a German military convoy. Italian partisans stopped the convoy at a checkpoint near Lake Como. They found him. On April 28th, Mussolini and Petacci were taken to a villa and shot. The details of who pulled the trigger remain disputed. What happened next is not. Their bodies were trucked 40 miles south to Milan and dumped at Piazzale Loreto, a gas station where, 1 year earlier, the bodies of 15 executed partisans had been publicly displayed by fascist forces. The crowd that gathered kicked, spat on, and urinated on the corpses. Then the bodies were hung upside down from the gas station's metal girder. The man who built his power on public adoration ended as a public exhibition. Upside down at a gas station while a crowd cheered. Mussolini's humiliation happened after death. Saddam's happened while he was alive. Case 9. Saddam Hussein. The leaked execution. Saddam Hussein. December 30th, 2006. Camp Justice, Kadhimiya District, northern Baghdad. Saddam had ruled Iraq for 24 years. On December 13, 2003, American soldiers found him hiding in a spider hole, a concrete-lined pit beneath a farmhouse near Tikrit. The man who had built 81 palaces was pulled from a hole barely large enough to lie down in. After a 2-year trial, he was sentenced to death by hanging. On the morning of December 30th, 2006, Saddam was led to the gallows. The room was not silent. Guards and witnesses chanted the name of Muqtada al-Sadr, a Shia cleric whose father Saddam had ordered killed. Saddam heard every word. He stood still. Someone in the room recorded the execution on a cell phone. The video was uploaded within hours. The footage went global. The moment was designed to close a chapter. Instead, it opened an argument that has never been settled. Saddam stood still. The next dictator tried to run. Case 10. Gaddafi. The drainage pipe. Muammar Gaddafi. October 20th, 2011. A drainage culvert beneath a road outside Sirte, Libya. Gaddafi had ruled Libya for 42 years, the longest reign of any dictator on this list. He controlled the military, the oil, the media, and the courts. He called himself the King of Kings of Africa. On October 20th, 2011, a NATO airstrike hit his convoy as it fled Sirte. Gaddafi survived the strike. He ran. He hid in a concrete drainage culvert beneath the road. Rebel fighters found him. Gaddafi was pulled from the pipe alive. He was conscious, bleeding, surrounded. Video from a cell phone shows him stumbling, held up by fighters, saying, "What did I do to you?" He was beaten. He was dragged through the streets. Within minutes, he was dead. His body was placed in a commercial freezer in Misrata and displayed for 4 days. Libyans lined up to take photos. The King of Kings died in a drainage pipe, asking strangers why. 10 dictators, 268 years of power. Not one of them was saved by it. If this changed how you see power, subscribe. We have more to show you.